A very good afternoon to one and all. At the outset, I would like to thank the organizers for having given us this opportunity to express our views and share some profound thoughts on the subject of generative AI, ethics, privacy, trust, and building consumer confidence in India. So, ladies and gentlemen, let me assure you one thing at the outset. Your Google and my Google is the same. So what we have decided is, let's talk beyond Google. And it is very important because strategic technologies like this cannot be dictated by technology platforms by Google to shape our views. If that is what we're going to talk, I think we're going to waste each other's time, not going to progress. The gathering that we have here, we have Sanket Atal, as has been already introduced to you. Then we have Narasimha and we have Shruti Kharbanda. So we have brainstormed a bit and tried to bring in certain perspectives, certain diverse perspectives. Perspectives probably that would be not matching the alignment that you've had so far. The idea here is to set the mind's thinking, to sow the seeds into your mind so that you can apply your common sense and get your idea of where this technology is heading to. Does this technology really merit the kind of attention that it is getting today? Or is it the end of all? Or is it something more sinister that is going to come out? And how is it going to affect your life and my life? And these are the aspects that we're going to touch in this panel discussion. So be rest assured. And before we start this, I'll now request each of the panelists to introduce themselves so that you know where they come from, and then you'll get a fair idea of why they say what they say. So may I now request Sanket Atal to introduce himself.
Hi, so the name is Sanket. I'm with Salesforce. And prior to this, I was heading a company called Intuit, which is an American fintech company. I was heading that in India. And several other companies before that, including long time at Oracle and MakeMyTrip. And as I was talking to Sudhakaran earlier, my foundation is in systems programming, as in I've designed operating systems and database management systems. And today, of course, I'm one of the pointy-haired managers in Salesforce. Glad to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Sanket. And now, may I request Narasimha to introduce himself to the gathering.
Hello, everyone. This is Narasimha. I have 22 years of experience in AI, data science, applied AI practice, building systems and solutions. I'm heading the data science and applied AI practice at MakeMyTrip. Besides the predictive prescriptive AI practice, of late, of course, we are using all the generative models for various use cases, pre-sales, post-sales, and all, in a travel e-commerce setting. So I come from that context of what we're doing, what are our learnings, and how do we look forward in terms of using these technologies, at least in an e-commerce setting and various other use cases.
Shruti.
Hi, everyone. I'm a woman in STEM. I love creating and destroying things. I keep saying that. I'm a serial entrepreneur. Of course, I'm an alumni at University of Oxford, mentor at Startup India, robotics and AI chair at Indian Chamber of Commerce. So there's a lot of things that I do, and there are a lot of hats that I wear. One of the most passionate things that I do currently is I'm trying to launch the first ever professional robotics league in India. So this is Robo versus Robo Sports. If anyone remembers Real Steel, the movie that came out about 12 years ago. So now we are trying to create that for real. So that's where I am. And I want to see India to be the topmost robotic product company in the world. That's my mission. That's where I want to take India towards.
In fact, I first met Shruti last year in Noida when I was adjudicating Robo versus Robo fight. So I do a lot of these stuffs, and that's when Shruti came up to me, and then we connected, and the journey is continuing. So now, thank you one and all for having introduced yourself. I will quickly take this 30 seconds to introduce myself. I'm Wing Commander Sudhakaran. I served in the Indian Air Force for around 22 years. My hands are as dirty as any one of the panelists here. So we all have dirty hands. When I say dirty hands, we've really put our hands into technology, trying to build it. We failed, and our failure has taught us a lot. So in our conversation, you will find semblances of that failure speaking as to what to do, what not to do, how it will go. So that is where the experience comes from. So to quickly tell you, I did my bachelor's in electrical and electronics engineering. And before that, I started programming right from the x86 when it first came to India when I was in my high school. So AI for me didn't occur in 2012, and for most of, for us who was in this bandwagon, it happened a long back because of the questions that I always found. Why is it not like this? Because computers were always good at if-then-else matrix. How can it go beyond it? So the thing that we call as machine learning today, the traditional data that gets fit into any curve fitting, finding the curve of best fit for the data that you do. So that's something that we did 30 years back. The only problem was the computers were insanely slow. So what is new today? Nothing much has changed big time, but yes, it's at the cusp of changing. And that's what we're going to discuss now. So let me start the discussion quickly with Sanket. He will share us the story of Salesforce and how it is dealing with generative AI. Am I right?
Thank you for the opportunity. So I'm sure everybody here has heard of the company Salesforce. We are synonymous with customer relationship management. In fact, our ticker symbol is CRM. And the company started off in the whole journey as kind of a game changer. It was the first SaaS enterprise company. And I need to mention that because there was a big leap of faith that happened. Fundamentally, we needed our customers to trust that being in a multi-tenant environment of a kind of a remote hosted data center would be safe and would be performing to their liking. Fortunately, we did very well with that, and the journey has been awesome. And from the very beginning, trust was our number one value. And trust within the company, but also trust by our customers that we will do the right thing, and hence the ability to be able to have things in the cloud. Now, what is happening over the past few years, especially last year, is that there's been a lot of hype about AI. And just like Sudhakaran mentioned, there's a lot of people who Google stuff and they get super excited about what to do. So the expectations of what can happen out of AI, whether it's predictive or generative, are huge. And then there is the person responsible for executing something like that within an enterprise, the CIO, the CTO, who's got to make sure that the latest and greatest technologies are used to serve the enterprise, but at the same time, it's done in a manner that's conducive to business growth and security. And there is a big gap between these two. What people expect will happen, which is very sci-fi-like, and then where people are today with respect to what will satisfy them in order for this technology to be adapted. And this big chasm is something that needs to be crossed for AI to truly be a reality everywhere. And as a company, our approach to AI has been very pragmatic. Now, we've been in the AI business for quite some time. In fact, more than a decade ago, we started an AI research group looking at all aspects of AI. And what we have found is that the biggest impediment to adoption is trust. If you guys remember, a while back, about a year back, there was a situation where two very enthusiastic engineers had taken the code that they had written and then passed it on to, I know, one of the LLMs, OpenAI or something, to see how it was structured or to get feedback from the LLM. And there was a big hue and cry about it because those were company secrets that were going into an LLM that would then be permanently embedded in that. And so that leads to a lot of security concerns by all companies. So what we have done is to be able to cross the gap between what the CIO needs to do to make the company successful and what the expectations are, we have created what's called a trust layer. And this trust layer enables the adoption of AI technologies in a very practical manner. And fundamentally, if you take a look at what is needed to execute AI within the enterprise, there is the user interface, which is basically, especially with generative, it's all conversational interfacing. And then there are the models that you use, right? They can be predictive models, they can be LLMs, etc. And then the foundational element of all of this is data. And that's where one really needs to start. So like you were pointing out, you have to take a look at the true nuts and bolts, and the true nuts and bolts of any AI strategy is what data you use. So that's where a huge focus for us is, and also the other focus on the AI level and the UI level is to provide access to AI, whether it's predictive or generative. By the way, we've been very successful. Today, we're doing more than 200 billion predictive and generative transactions a day, and it's growing, right? But the way we do it is within the context of what you're trying to do. So you're not going to go to Salesforce and try to write a love poem. You're not going to go to Salesforce and try to create a picture with a dog who's like driving a car or whatever it is. But you will go there to leverage AI to do your business better. And it's in that context that we provide AI. And our goal is to make everybody's lives easier by leveraging this fantastic technology, but in a practical manner and not in a sensational manner. I'll leave it at that for now.
Thank you, Sanket. I'll quickly come for the second round because I know you're not done with it. You have tons of experience, and I know you have got a lot to share on this. I'll quickly shift to Narasimha, wherein he is going to talk about what are the key factors to bolster trust amongst customers and how can developers handle them. What role can government and industry play in designing such kind of systems?
I think if I have to think about like the themes, right? Like the way we see, and this is an active area of research, of course, is like the transparency, salience, the unbiased nature, and then the ability to reference the facts back to the sources. So these are the 4 dimensions you can think of in which how you are addressing, how you are designing the system. It's not just about which tool you use, but also how you design the system and then put it in front of the customers so that all these aspects are covered. So a lot of user experience, user interface aspects come into when we are using, let's say, generative models for the customer-centric side of the problems. On the other side, when it's about agent-specific, let's say, call center or other, similar needs come up. And there, I would say, the more we use these technologies as assist flows so that we don't remove the human in touch, I think the trust would be better because the agents would be much more proficient in terms of how to use, what not to use, etc., and face the customer in a right way, the gating mechanism. Besides that, if you're using these technologies for employee productivity, let's say Copilot or the Visit Coder or the other coder language models for developing and improving the productivity, that's a different ball game altogether because it's your employees who are going to use those tools and write new code. So depending on the audience, the dimensions change. But if you can think about a framework and how we use these generative models, my view is as following. There are large language models which are foundational, general purpose models, and there is a lot of knowledge also encoded in these models and also conversational abilities, right? However, if you have to rely on the knowledge which is encoded within these languages, then there's you will face a lot of surprises at one point or the other. So if you can use these models for conversational ability, style, tone, whereas for the knowledge aspects, you can hook into your own sources and references, and there is a way to design these systems. Your ability to refer back and ability to be transparent and also give more salient responses and also be a little unbiased, it'll be higher. So I think it's about how you design this, and the UX also comes into it's very important in this. In terms of how the regulatory laws or policies can help, I think nobody can say more than Pawan Dugal has spoken just before this session. It's still an open area, and there are a lot of questions, probably more questions than answers at this moment. However, as I said, there's an active area of research everywhere, and the way we are decoupling things in terms of the source of truth versus the conversational abilities, right? Maybe some aspects of that has to be enforced, right? Besides that, there are many security trust aspects that organizations can cover. For example, red teaming, using teams to kind of hack your own systems to figure out what jailbreaking, so that your own systems, you can break it to see where there are flaws. Are there any adversarial attacks, this, that, other. And besides this, of course, some of this also has to be looked in the context of, is there any dark pattern here? Agnostic of whether it's a generative model or any other technology. What kind of dark patterns are more prevalent, and how do we kind of avoid this? So organizations need to have an eye. So the general rule of law I use is, what you can measure, you can improve. If you can't measure something, you cannot improve. So all organizations, while they deploy Gen AI applications, they should also have some measurement methods for capturing this, and also figuring out how much of it is truthful versus not. Maybe some kind of a community nodes internally built or in a different way. But if you have a method to measure, I think you can improve. All this in the context of generative models. I think I'll not call them as AI, because we are still far away from AGI. Given that I'm a practitioner, I know what these are to some level. I'd prefer to call these as generative models versus prescriptive models, and I'll leave it at there.
Thank you. What you can measure, you can improve. What you can't, you cannot. That's something that you need to keep in mind, because as we progress in the discussion, we'll be delving around this particular aspect. Nice that Narasimha brought this out. I'll quickly go to Shruti on issues and concerns around privacy and algorithmic bias with generative AI.
Thank you, Sudhakaran. I think today a lot of the panelists and a lot of my colleagues have talked about issues around privacy, around trust, around algorithmic bias, and I think this is a time that we need to take a step back and really understand what is the dimension of the issue that we are talking about. So I thought I'll spend some time explaining how big the problem is, so we can all take this a lot more seriously than put it aside and say, yes, there's an issue. So Gen AI is an amazing technology. We can generate new content, new text, new images, audio, everything. It's a powerful tool, but with a powerful tool, there's a darker side to it, right? Now picture living in a world where you cannot distinguish deep fake from reality, where synthetic identities orchestrate malicious information campaigns, and you can't distinguish what is true, what is not. There are targeted scams. I think the people have touched about that. With unparalleled precision, I mean, you wouldn't even know, like we said, I think Dr. Pawan touched on a case where there was a kidnapping case, fake kidnapping case, right? There are custom tailor-made alibis. There's subtle persuasion bias that you slowly don't understand. There's radicalized content being created by algorithms, right? So with maturity of AI, the lines between virtual and real world is blurring. And with that, in fact, Professor Emilio Ferreira, a scientist and a professor at University of South California, he created a model earlier this year. He created a 2D chart where he charted the intent on the y-axis, which had 3 degrees, saying deception, propaganda, and dishonesty. Deception is more singular towards a single individual. Propaganda is, of course, disseminating information, and dishonesty is pure intent of creating something wrong. And on the x-axis, he created 4 dimensions: personal loss and identity theft. And I'm going to take you through how difficult, and let me read out this 3x4 model, and it will give you the dimension of the problem. When we talk about personal loss and identity theft, for deception, think synthetic identities. For propaganda, it is digital impersonations. For dishonesty, it's targeted harassment. For financial and economic damage, deception is bespoke ransom. We've talked about that. For propaganda is extremist schemes. For dishonesty is market manipulation. Now you try and see how big the issue can be. Market manipulation can actually impact an economy of a country. Then another aspect is information manipulation, which is information control of an individual. Then influence campaigns, fake campaigns. Then information disorder, where you don't even know what to believe at all. And the last one, which is the worst, is socio-technical infrastructural damage. And here you think systematic abrasions of belief in terms of deception, and propaganda is synthetic realities, and there's targeted surveillance on people. So dimensions of the issue can be a lot more than just being small. And don't take me wrong, the same technology can be used for positive things. For example, fabrication of historic artifacts, whereas we can recreate what we have lost, but at the same time we can create fake historic artifacts. So what would you believe? And similarly, there are loads and loads of examples that we're talking about. Beneath the Gen AI, the algorithms, they all learn from data. And that is where, it all learns from data, and that is where I think we need to take a step back and start focusing training data and real data that is being used. And the oversights we've talked about, hallucinations that need to be recorded, rectified, the omissions that have to be regularly identified, the errors in data that need to be rectified, the biases need to be removed. It's a fact. We all have data that has biases. It's inherent. To say the biases will be completely removed when we feed into Gen AI is never going to happen. So the question is, how do you keep identifying those biases and keep reducing it over time? And therefore, come to a better Gen AI platform that we can use.
So before I would sum up with my perspective, I would quickly go for a round two, because I know they have still some more to convey. So I'll quickly latch on to Sanket and ask him this question of how does he see generative AI and human ethics coexisting? What needs to be done? Like, how will it redefine the morality and ethics that will shape up in the future?
That's a deep philosophical question, Sudhakaran. But I'll attempt to address it in engineering style, where, look, all of the stuff that we've just heard from Shruti, lots of dangers abound, right? But as is there with any technology, and you have to position things in the right way. Now, if you take a look at public consumption of technology like this, all kinds of things can happen. We today live in a world where there's abundance of rabbit holes that people can pursue on, various social platforms. I won't name them. So those things are there. The trick here is, how do you structure things so that somebody who's enabling Gen AI on a platform is able to do that in a manner that's relatively safe? And one of the key things behind something like this is letting a human in the middle participate in taking a look at what all exists and how do we rate. For example, all of generative AI is based on prompts of some kind or the other. And when you're generating prompts, you need to be able to take a look at where you are with your prompt generation, what's the kind of data you're providing. And again, going back to the data being the foundation, I'll touch upon that a little bit more later. But you have to be able to do that. Now, with that come certain results, and then you have to be able to rate the results, right? So this is where human intervention is critically important, so that you're able to provide feedback to the system as to whether something has high-level toxicity, is it a hallucination, and the system has to build in certain ability to audit what it does and provide feedback. So a good system would be able to say, hey, here's what I have generated based on your prompt, and my confidence level on something like this based on the past experience is X, Y, or Z. And given that, then people can make a decision as to whether to be able to use that or not, right? And then there is the whole concept of having a human at the helm, so that you're able to take a look at the system in a holistic manner and decide how you would like to shape it. Now, I'll go back to the whole data question. Fundamentally, you're only as good as your data. So I'm an enterprise software guy, so I'll stick to that kind of a world here. But you have data all over the enterprise. Any average company has hundreds, if not thousands, of applications all around, and there's important data that's resident in various parts of the company. And if you want to be able to use that to shape your own model, for example, or to be able to provide a much better experience, so you're able to generate prompts leveraging all of this data, you have to have some kind of a centralized access to the data. So we have something we call, it's a active lakehouse, which is effectively a combination of a data lake and a warehouse, which combines data from all your sources within the enterprise and is able to pull in the data. Certain integrations would be like a non-copy pulling in of the data, so in a federated kind of sense. And with this power, with this leverage, you're able to put all kinds of relevant information to generate your prompts appropriately. And this can be done in real time. So this is a foundational entity that will allow you to generate your models, whether it's predictive or generative, and it allows you to structure prompts in a manner so that you're providing the right information. That, coupled with the trust layer that we have, where we check for things like, is there any personally identifiable information that's going out? And if it is, then can we mask it? And then when your prompt is supposed to going out of your system to some publicly available LLM, we have deals with those LLMs so that the data passed in with the prompt is not retained. And then when the data comes back, when the result comes back from GenAI, it goes through toxicity detection, hallucination, etc. And finally, there's a human intervention. So this entire circle, which involves a foundational data layer, you leverage the data to be able to generate your own models, or you create your own prompts in a very rich way, grounding it in rich data about your customers, for example, and then leveraging trust. All of this makes for the ethical and safe usage of Gen AI towards making an enterprise more secure. Now, on the social implications of direct access to Gen AI, etc., Sudhakaran, I don't think I'm qualified to make that statement. But one has to be careful. One has to be careful in this, and anybody providing such platforms which enable people to be able to do interesting things that then potentially be harmful, I think the onus is on them to make sure that their systems are designed for the public good.
So there are questions which creates vacancies. So people can qualify themselves to answer these questions, and you'll find a lot of job in the new AI world, wherein we are heading to massive joblessness. So on that count, I will quickly go to Narasimha and ask him the question on privacy and trust being the two pillars on which consumer confidence is so much based on. How does he see that evolving in the generative AI era?
Privacy is a very subtle topic because the customers have to share data, not just on a particular platform. Let's say, as Mr. Dugal was sharing right before our session, we interact with technology in various ways, whether it is in terms of search engines, whether it is in terms of even how your mobile data, what all activity you're doing, and the social media platforms that you're interacting with. A lot of data is being shared there, actively or inactively, and those are used by algorithms, right? So in part, those algorithms are using it to make your experience personalized and relevant, rightfully so. However, it also comes at the on the foundation that you are sharing your data, and that data is used in a way that is not too intrusive, you may say. So for example, I think on the privacy aspect, there are some aspects that overlay into dark patterns and all, how you're using that to kind of do something which probably is out of the volition of an organization. So I would say that it's not specific to Gen AI, but now you talk about generative models, and in the context of, let's say, safety, right? As I said, if the organizations are being more transparent and also pointing to the right sources, at least while generating text, right? It will instill more confidence. Generating images or speech, it's a different ball game, because the way the models generate this, it's based on all the training data that has gone in. In some cases, it is not even possible to debias those algorithms or the data, so because there could have been even some adversarial injection of the data. There's something called like sleeper injection that Anthropic AI had released a paper on. You can read about it, that which will trigger after a particular date. Okay. Prior to that, you wouldn't even know that kind of a sleeper injection was there. Now, it's almost, and unlearning that is almost impossible. So that aspect is like really active area. So as I said, if organizations can, at least in their domain, use these models more for their core ability, conversation, reasoning, language, and not for like the source of truth, at least in a text generation problems, I think will be much more in a better position to give the right answers and continue to have customer confidence. And the UX, UI, user interface design part, there should always be transparency, and most of the organizations do. If not, they should put an icon or appropriately represent, so that what is a natural text as opposed to what is synthesized or generated, so customers can discern and then continue to make good decisions factoring that in.
Let me quickly go to Shruti and then ask her, if she were to become the government of India's advisor, how would she advise the country to, reduce privacy issues and algorithmic biases in this fast developing space of generative AI?
Thank you, Sudhakaran. I think Gen AI is an area where I would suggest a lot of self-regulation, because if real regulation came into picture, which will be very tight, would then prompt a lot of entrepreneurs to say that we've been set back in the innovation world. So there's a lot of self-regulation I would recommend. And there are certain risk mitigation strategies that can be involved. So continuous monitoring of AI output to see whether it's it's not hallucinating or it's not fake. Establishing ethical guidelines, promoting transparency in the way the AI is processing data, educating stakeholders about the pitfalls, and of course, there are a few techniques that can be adopted. So one is proof of identity, which is Aadhaar-based as opposed to email-based, which would allow you to actually identify unique users as opposed to having a lot of fake users or synthetic identities. Multi-factor authentication protocols, which is blockchain-based, token-based, cryptographic. Make sure you prompt audience with disclaimers that this data has been created by Gen AI. So please be mindful. If you want to use it, validate it. So it should be, the disclaimer needs to be more prompt as opposed to be subtle in the privacy statements that they have. Content labeling, which can be visual tags. Source verification and provenance using blockchain technology. So if Gen AI is using certain sources as data, so be able to track back those sources. So what we say in education is we reference or bibliography of our content, which I think creates a lot of provenance of data. digital watermarking. And in terms of data itself, I would recommend anonymizing data because that in itself removes a lot of the privacy issues that a lot of users have. So when I say anonymize, no name, no email, no contact details, it can be very useful for footfalls, for business and events, and there are a lot of things you can do without actually having user-specific data being leaked. Securing data properly and making sure any data breaches are widely announced to the users if it happens ever. Making sure data collection is reliable from authorized sources, authenticated sources, and not just bought from, in India these days, there are a lot of companies selling data. And I would question their authenticity. Even in some reliable companies, I have found out there's been a lot of gaps, right? So authenticity of data is very important. Operational oversight, and I will keep repeating that word because no matter how much Gen AI is going to create an output, you need to validate the output is correct, output is non-biased and not hallucinated. And that needs to be done. Data privacy. Like I said before, you're not going to be able to reduce bias because all the data that we have is already biased. But continuously assessing biases that are there and reducing them as an iterative process, and transparency, which is explaining the decision making of your Gen AI is the most important thing. If you can explain how the decision making is done, you would know what input is given and what output to expect, rather than using AI as a black box, which is where you kind of lose ability to identify whether a system is acting as recommended or not. So I think those would be some of the tips that I would give at this point.
Thank you. So before we get into the audience round, throwing questions at us, I would like to throw another alternative perspective, which I believe is very important. The reason why is because Sanket rightly started saying that the term AI is very distorted. Do we really understand the meaning of what AI is? We very casually use it, generative AI. If everybody says generative AI, we have a conference in generative AI. In fact, this month I've attended 4 conferences on generative AI. And I've had invite for 3 more. And what are we discussing? Discussing things the same old way that probably Google told us. Do we really as a nation, as individuals, apply our common sense to understand what are we talking about? So let me put this, let me not I'll just quickly give 10 odd points. There could be something that could be significantly out of alignment from what you traditionally believed in, but then it's worth giving a thought tonight. First of all, what is AI? I saw a toothbrush on LinkedIn saying that it has got AI. Has it got reduced to that level? Is our intelligence going to be in the bristles of toothbrushes? There's something wrong, because everybody is in the urgency of making it AI. They are very casually using this term, so much so that in our urge to buy something, we are intending to buy gold, but what we are ending up is not even bronze. That's what the state that we're getting in. So if I have to tell you what real AI is, it is the ability of the machines to be able to exhibit intelligence at par or better than humans. That is the original and only definition of AI. Now, why it got distorted is because people started on, over a period of time, believing that this is not possible. Now, if it is not possible, you can't call white paint as milk. So if milk is not there, you call paint as paint. And you work towards, what you thought is elusive. That's what science does. Now, what's worse is, anybody claims that, I'm into AI. How many of you did even think of putting a test to their claim? That leads to the next question, is there a test? How many of you know that there is indeed a test to test the real definition of AI? I will leave for you to find out what that test is. And if tomorrow somebody says, my system is AI, ask them whether it passes that test. If it doesn't pass the test, tell them to wait till such time it passes. And it is okay to call not AI. Why sell something as AI when it is not? You may think why it is important. Imagine if you have a weapon which is AI and you're taking a toy to the battlefield. What are the chances that you're going to come alive from that kind of a scenario? I come from that kind of a background, so therefore we don't believe in faking ourselves, believing in falsehoods, wrong foundations. That will take us nowhere as a country. And this is something that we need to understand. So is generative AI real AI? The answer is no. It is an age wherein it is just about to enter the real AI. And the reason why we are talking about is we are still grappling with a lot of data, a lot of training. We are still talking about human programming, which is going to do that. See, AI is a strategic technology akin to a nuclear bomb. In a nuclear bomb, you can only initiate a chain reaction. You can't control it after that. Similarly, in intelligence, you can only set the conditions to evolution. You can't program it. If you're programming it, it's not intelligence. You're trying to actually solve a set of a narrow domain wherein it can take a certain input and give a certain output, and that is not intelligence. That's calculator, that's computer. And that was what computers were always doing. What's the new thing that has come in the market is, you can today play with data, find a curve of best fit, and then use that curve, solve the weights for it. It is just solving a linear equation, y equal to mx plus c, where y and x are data. You solve m and c, for every y, for every x, you will get a y. That's predictive analytics for you. That's not intelligence. Intelligence is far more complicated. It is something that is related to deeper things like consciousness. And consciousness means context awareness. Here, in this, when you talk about how you build it. So, how do you build it? Does that mean AGI doesn't exist? It exists. It may come out tomorrow, the week later, or the month later. Nobody knows, because people who are really behind this are not they are working under dark curtains. And we are, as a nation, being waylaid into something which is not AI, and we are behind that. And this is something that we need to understand. If we understand this, then only we will run the real race. Imagine if there is an Olympics which is happening in Paris, and then there is a fake Olympics which was happening somewhere in the Caribbean islands. You may win medals there, but it will not count for anything. That's probably what is happening in the race for intelligence singularity. And these are points that, as somebody who has been practicing it, I thought that I will throw this to you. Not for you to believe me, but for you to ask these questions when you go to bed. Ask these questions when somebody says that they work in AI. Does that pass that test? That's very important. So somebody talked about, injecting an algorithm into, a nefarious behavior. So actually, there are terms for it. So in traditional computing algorithms in cybersecurity parlance, it used to be called as a zero-day vector. That is what the Stuxnet did to the Iranian nuclear program. But in AI, there is no zero-day vector. We talk about what is called as an intent vector. And an intent vector is the same as the intent of a human being. You can never find out what is the intention. And this intention is both moral as well as induced. And these are things that we need to keep in mind. And we have to also understand that intelligence always accompanies deception. Without deception, there is no intelligence. Because if you are naive, then you're gone forever. So having said this, I will thank all of you for having patiently listened to us. I thank my panelists for having expressed their views, but we've also thrown some alternate perspectives for you to think deep, to understand what AI is and what it is not. Not merely get caught in the bandwagon when everybody says this is what it is. Thank you, one and all.